Takže čau, já jsem David Sura, Make CD a dneska tady máme velice vzácného hosta, Thomasem Langem, jeden z top 10 bubeníků světových, který zavítal do Prahy po zhruba asi 7 letech, takže ho tady dneska vyspovídáme. So, hi Thomas, welcome to Prague.
Thank you.
After I guess,
Ahoy lidi.
After I guess 7 years.
Yes.
Was the last time you came?
Yeah.
Cool. So, I want to use this chance to talk to something to get to understand something more about you,
Okay.
or the people would know. So let's start from the beginning. So
Okay.
when did you start to play drums? Actually,
I started playing at age 5. I saw a drummer on television in Austria. I grew up in a small town near Vienna, and I saw a drummer on television, and I was immediately intrigued because he was the only member of the band who was sitting down. Everybody else had to stand up in the band, so I thought that was interesting. And he seemed to be the boss. You know, he counted in the song, and everybody's looking at him. And he started the song with a big drum fill, so he seemed to be the authority in the band and somewhat in command. And that was something really intriguing and interesting.
do you remember who was it?
Yes, I found out much later it was Joe English from the band Sea Level. It was a show on television called Spotlight, which was the only music show we had on Austrian television in the 70s. And it was on once a week for like 25 minutes or something on a Sunday. And it was that show, and the band was Sea Level, drummer Joe English. And then coincidentally, a few days after I saw the guy on TV, I went to a couple of days later to my local church, and there was a band playing in the church or outside the church. And I walked up to the drum set, and I stood in front of the bass drum, which I was actually, at that point, I was still 4 years old. It was before my 5th birthday. So I was, about this big, and I stood in front of this giant bass drum, and it was almost the size of me. And simply the fact that it was so powerful and so loud and so noisy, and the chrome of the drums was so shiny, it was also impressive, and it really touched me, as a child. And from that moment on, I was hooked.
Cool. And you said you started at age of 5, so you went to a music school?
Yes, immediately. I bugged my mother to play the drums when I was 4, and for about 6 months, a little more, she's like, nah, it's probably just a fad. It's only a phase. But I kept nagging and bugging her to buy me a drum or drum set, and then eventually she said to me that, okay, she'll pay for a drum set if I go or a snare drum, if I go and take drum lessons immediately. And she thought that maybe that would put me off or turn me off somehow. And she also said if I want to play drums, I have to learn a real instrument at the same time, like piano. So I said, okay. And I got a drum. I took drum lessons immediately, and I took piano lessons. And that's how it all started. And I had a fantastic teacher, a drum teacher, and he made it very, very, very fun and interesting for me. So I didn't get turned off at all by the lessons.
So, and you said it was early 70s.
Yes.
You started to learn drums.
Exactly.
What kind
72,
of...
actually.
72. It's quite a long time ago.
Yes.
So what kind of source you could use for your drumming?
Well, I had a teacher, and my teacher
was teacher.
He was a classical percussionist with the Vienna Symphonic Orchestra. So he was a very accomplished musician, and not a drum set player. He played timpani and classical percussion, snare drums, triangle, and concert toms and stuff like that. So it was a very different way of learning compared to today. Where you can go to any drum set teacher anywhere. At the time, there weren't many good drum set teachers, especially in Austria. It was all classical. But he could play drum set, and we did a lot of snare drum exercises in our lessons. And then at the end of the lesson, we would sit down on the drum set and play a little bit. And I stayed with this teacher for about 7 years. And he was a very good, very strict, very authoritarian, very orthodox,
the bad guy.
Yeah, sort of, music teacher. But he taught me how to practice correctly. very early on, and that made a big difference in my playing career. Up to this day, it makes a huge difference because I think because I was taught how to practice before I was taught how to play, I think I was always a very efficient practicer, and I made a lot of progress practicing because I was able to focus and concentrate and practice according to the most important practice rules, whereas most other musicians I knew around me never learned how to practice correctly and wasted a lot of time practicing. So
it's quite important, right? It's quite important.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the most important things, and I think it saved me probably 50% of my practicing time. The fact that I practiced very efficiently. Even today compared to other people, I practice much less, but I get more results, luckily, and I still contribute that to my first teacher.
Perfect. What kind of secret is it?
Well, there's no secret. I mean, it's a
if you
really
can describe it shortly.
It's to concentrate and focus and not play when you practice and not practice when you play. There are practice rules. Don't play when you practice, don't practice when you play. Or practice like you play. You have to play, when you practice, you have to pretend it's a concert. You have to practice with the same intensity and focus and concentration like in a concert. It's just like practicing a soccer, in a soccer practice. You practice like it's a game, like it's a match,
right.
Or don't play when you practice, don't practice when you play means that you should never interrupt an exercise, always stay focused, never, when you try to practice something complicated, never veer off, never sort of interrupt the exercise with something that you can already play just to make yourself feel good and to ease your mind for a little bit and sort of stroke your ego, going, oh, I'm not really that bad. I can do this, really, really well. And now I go back to what I can't do well. So all these kind of things where you waste in combination about 50% of your practice time on noodling around, on playing around, on jamming and things like that, not concentrated practice. And rules like practice every day. It's better to practice 1 hour every day than 7 hours on Sunday,
Yeah.
and so on. So many rules, and I talk about these rules today a lot in my drum camps, for example, and other situations when I teach, because I think that makes all the difference, and that allowed me to do so much more over the years. And I know for a fact that if you practice correctly, you can save 50% of your practice time. So just to put it into perspective, over 10 years, that's 5 years, and over 20 years, that's 10 years of your practice time that you saved. And you can proceed twice as quickly through so many stages of your playing if you do it correctly.
Talking about the practicing, so you're playing for about 40 years now. How often and how long do you practice? You said maybe every day. If
well,
possible,
I don't. Unfortunately, when you start getting very, very busy playing and working, you don't have time to practice. So my practice schedule ended many, many years ago, and I haven't been able to practice for probably 15 years or so. I wish I could. It's something I enjoy doing. I enjoy developing, my craft and what I do creatively. But there's simply no time. I play all the time, so it's not like I'm not working on my playing on a regular basis, but there's simply no time to sit down and practice for 4 or 5 hours a day. It's just not possible because, I'm working, I'm traveling, I have, I run a record label, I run a studio, I travel all over the world, I tour with artists, I record, it's crazy, and I have a family,
what you're talking about,
so it's just not possible. But, I used to practice an average of, 4 hours a day. And then in addition to that, I did a lot of recording and touring and playing and gigging, but practice time, I dedicated, 3 to 4 hours every day, no matter what I was doing that day. If I had a rehearsal in the evening or in the afternoon, I would still practice in the morning. If I had a gig, I would still practice in the morning. If I had a session, I would still practice in the morning. So I took it very, very, seriously.
So, of course, when you practice, you're focusing on your technique. Do you think that the technique is the most important thing, or
No.
feeling is more important?
Technique. When you practice, you don't just focus on technique, or at least you should not. A technique is important because technique is a tool, and it's a tool that allows you to efficiently translate your ideas onto an instrument.
Right.
And think of technique. The technique has nothing to do with creativity, has nothing to do with musicality with expression or emotion, nothing. It's just like a hammer or a power tool, like a chainsaw, okay? Yeah. And the more tools you have, the easier it is to build big things. If you want to build a house and you only have a hammer, it's not going to be easy.
Quite difficult. Yeah.
It's very difficult. You know, maybe after 60 years of chopping away at bricks, you can stack up a house. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it's beautiful. It doesn't mean it's very creative, or it doesn't mean that it's a reflection of what you really want to build. You know what I mean? And it's the same with music. If you don't have the technique, often you cannot say what you really want to say. You know, if you want to have a log cabin, you know, and you only have if you have a chainsaw, it's easy to build a log cabin. You know, if you have a welder, it's difficult to build a log cabin. And a lot of people don't have the right tools for the job, or not enough tools. And the more tools you have, if you have pliers and a chainsaw and a circular saw and a bandsaw and a welder and everything else, a crane and a digger, then it's very easy to build a great, beautiful house.